It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. Crisis at the BBC as the broadcaster's Director General, Tim Davie, and the Chief Executive of BBC News, Deborah Turness, both resign. Their departures tonight celebrated by the US President after the White House criticised the BBC for a misleading edit of a Donald Trump speech. Also ahead, an admission that wrongful releases have increased under Labour, but a senior minister insists the government is gripping the prisons crisis. Plus, falls silent on the 80th anniversary of World War II as royals, politicians and veterans remember those who died.
This is how the Amazon is disappearing, by literally going up in smoke.
Sky News goes deep into the Amazon to meet the indigenous people trying to save their land. Good evening. We begin with the growing crisis at the BBC and the resignation of two of the broadcaster's most senior bosses. Director General Tim Davie and Chief Executive of News and Current Affairs, Deborah Turness, have confirmed they will step down. That's after accusations that a Panorama documentary misled the audience by editing a speech by the US President. In his resignation letter, Mr. Davie accepted that mistakes were made and that he had to take ultimate responsibility. His departure has just been welcomed by Donald Trump. The Sky's arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer reports.
As Director General, Tim Davie had steered the BBC through such choppy waters that the tabloids had dubbed him Teflon Tim. But even Tim Davie couldn't steer the BBC past the damning criticism he'd faced last week over the misleading way this speech was shown by Panorama ahead of the Capitol riots.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Two bits of audio sandwiched together, but recorded over 50 minutes apart. News of Davie's resignation met with this post on X by the US President, who said the top people in the BBC, including Tim Davie, the boss, are all quitting/fired because they were caught doctoring my very good speech of January 6th. These are very dishonest people who tried to step on the scales of a presidential election. Davie's downfall came about in the end through a leaked memo by a former advisor to the corporation, flagging the Panorama edit as an example of the corporation's alleged serious and systemic bias, ultimately triggering resignations from both Davie and his head of news, Deborah Turness. With Davie announcing to staff, "I wanted to let you know that I have decided to leave the BBC after 20 years. This is entirely my decision and I remain very thankful to the chair and board for their unswerving and unanimous support throughout my entire tenure, including during recent days. I count myself very lucky to have served as DG number 17. I will have a proper chance to see many of you before I go, but I have been incredibly proud to lead the BBC as DG for over 5 years."
It's not just that the Trump video was faked. It was the fact that Mr. Davie and Ms. Turness knew that it was faked for the last 6 months. They attended a meeting 6 months ago in May 2025 when it was discussed, and they did nothing about it. They remained silent. I think that sniffs of a cover-up. They decided not to do anything about it and presumably hoped it would go away and no one would ever find out, and that's just completely unacceptable.
Davie had almost perfected the art of strategic invisibility, riding out major missteps on Strictly and firings on MasterChef. But it was his handling of errors when it came to news that critics argued threatened to strike at the very heart of what the BBC stands for, that notion of trust and accountability.
My name is Abdullah. I'm 13 years old.
Davie had already dodged calls for his resignation earlier this year when it emerged a narrator on one of its documentaries was the child of a Hamas official. The BBC had investigated, apologised and tried to move on. Davie was also taking a serious bashing from politicians on the right, with former Prime Minister Boris Johnson threatening to stop paying his TV licence fee unless Davie quit.
These examples have really dented trust and confidence in the BBC. It goes way beyond just political bias. I think they've lost touch with a large element of the British population. We want them to be successful. We want them to succeed. They're a really important part of the broadcasting ecosystem. But at the moment, they're their own worst enemy.
While some may see Tim Davie as a victim of culture wars in the time of Trump, after a week of ignoring the fire alarms going off inside of New Broadcasting House, in truth, the heat was far too hot for Davie to do anything else but resign.
Well, in a moment, we'll get reaction from Washington and Westminster. But first to Katie, who's at New Broadcasting House for us tonight. And Katie, the BBC has come under mounting pressure. Tim Davie highlighting the intense personal and professional demands of his role. With the litany of mistakes that have occurred, was it always inevitable that he would have to go?
I think certainly within the last week it was an insurmountable amount of criticism that he was coming under. So I think so, really. Look, he has said in his statement tonight he's not immediately going. It's going to be a process that takes a number of months. But the BBC is under an incredible amount of pressure to find someone very quickly to fill his shoes. Don't forget, we're hurtling towards now the 2027 charter renewal time, where the BBC is all about trying to secure up its financial future. And we live in a very precarious time for the BBC at the moment. The TV landscape, as we know it, has fundamentally changed. And in terms of news, having trust in news at the moment is so important. Look, we're outside the BBC at the moment. Just a moment ago, somebody walked past us and shouted, look, the BBC should be shut down. It's about time that people went. There's so much passion in terms of the members of the public and how they feel towards the BBC. I think the BBC had no choice, really, in terms of someone having to take accountability for this, and that person was Tim Davie. The question is now who will replace him, and whether or not anyone is willing really to put their name forward, given the amount of flack, the amount of grief that comes with a job like this.
OK, well, let's cross to Mark Stone now in Washington. And Mark, these resignations come just 48 hours after the BBC was criticised by the White House. What have we heard from Donald Trump this evening?
Yes, the memo was first released by the Prescott memo, first published by The Telegraph. And clearly, because of the link to the White House, the speech that the Panorama programme edited in the way that they did, as was outlined in Katie's report there, clearly it has a lot of interest for President Trump and for the White House. Now, on Friday last week, Caroline Levitt, the press secretary, she did an interview with The Telegraph where she said that this proved that the BBC was 100% fake news, echoing the language of her boss there. And then we got the tweet or the social media post from Donald Trump earlier on today. We have had a few words from Donald Trump on that social media post. He hasn't spoken publicly. He's just landed here in Washington from Florida. And we expect that he might speak when he gets back to the White House shortly. So we'll bring that to you. Caroline Levitt has released a couple of statements. She is his press secretary, as I say. The first was on social media on X. She first said, released two images, two screenshots. The first one of the Telegraph article last week, which revealed the memo, in which the clip from Panorama was published. She then released another screen grab from the BBC today, announcing the resignation, as you can see there. Shot chaser were the two words that she put with that. And she has since released another statement on X, where she says BBC News is dying because they are anti-Trump fake news. Everyone should watch GB News, so she said. So a hint there, more than a hint, that the White House clearly not only has its favoured broadcasters here in the United States, we've known that for a long time, but now has the same across the pond in the UK. It's worth noting that the relationship between GB News and the Trump White House is close. GB News recently opened up a Washington bureau. They had a lavish launch party at a club here in Washington, and quite a few members of Trump's cabinet were there, including Caroline Levitt, who spoke. And it's also worth noting that their lead presenter is Nigel Farage, who also has a close relationship with President Trump. As I say, we're waiting to see what President Trump says, if he says anything when he arrives back at the White House. He's en route there now.
OK, well, let's bring in Amanda Akas in Westminster now. Amanda, we've had lots of political reaction here today, including from former Prime Ministers.
Yes, I think it's fair to say that the woes of the BBC has resulted in quite a gleeful response from many politicians to the right of British politics. And former Prime Minister Liz Truss has responded by retweeting some of those posts from Donald Trump and Caroline Levitt with clapping emojis, calling for the abolition of the licence fee and indeed an end to national broadcasting altogether. And that call about ending the licence fee has been echoed by former Home Secretary Suella Braverman and also by Nadine Dorries, who, while she was Culture Secretary, did actually try and see the end of the licence fee. Now, all of those three work closely with Boris Johnson, the former PM, who, of course, has been really instrumental this week in piling pressure on the BBC with his threat to stop paying the licence fee himself, unless Tim Davie came forward to answer questions about the Panorama documentary. Now, that's not quite the official Tory party line. They say they do want the BBC to succeed, but they've got quite a long list of editorial changes they would like to see that go rather much further than the leaked dossier of complaints from Michael Prescott. They want to see changes to coverage in the Middle East, from North America and Gaza as well. Now, the current government, Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, has issued a much more nuanced statement, really thanking Tim Davie for his work and paying tribute to the BBC as an organisation. In fact, the only British political leader really standing up for the BBC at this moment is Sir Ed Davie of the Liberal Democrats, who said it's easy to see why Donald Trump wants to trash the BBC and destroy it, and calling on the Prime Minister and other British political leaders to speak up on its behalf and to stop him getting his hands on it, as he put it. But I think given the state of current UK-US relations, that's something that's very unlikely to happen.
OK, Amanda, Mark and Katie, thank you all. Of course, be back to Mark. Should we hear from Donald Trump? In the meantime, senior prison officers blame outdated systems, inexperienced staff and underfunding. And today, a senior cabinet minister has described the increase in the number of accidental prison releases as unacceptable. Lisa Nandy told Sky News the government is working to get a grip on the prisons crisis, as Paul Kelso reports.
Right, so at the moment, we've got a person under arrest on suspicion of being wanted.
When Sky News witnessed the arrest of Brahmin Kador Sharif, a sex offender wrongfully released from prison, the pictures captured a justice system apparently at breaking point.
You called the police?
No, that's suicide.
You called the police?
A Labour minister conceding the problem has got worse on their watch.
Under the last government, for quite some time, there were on average 17 wrong releases. Under this government, that has risen. It's 22. That is completely unacceptable. It was unacceptable before. It's unacceptable now. Even one is too many. And the Justice Secretary is gripping this by appointing Dame Lynn Owers, who is the former director of the National Crime Agency, to make sure that we really grip this, starting with the antiquated paper-based system that was developed in the 1980s that is still being used.
The number of prisoners incorrectly released more than doubled last year to 262, a problem many linked to an early release scheme intended to reduce pressure. That may be compounded by the relative inexperience of prison officers, with almost half in the job less than 4 years. All with funding, both overall and per head, falling below levels a decade ago.
The problem with the early release schemes is there's been at least 3 since the government came into power. And that means that staff have to recalculate tens of thousands of sentences. That ultimately leads to human error because we don't digitalise those calculations. It's an archaic and antiquated system using pen and paper, so obviously there's going to be mistakes. And that leads to the pressure on frontline staff who have to release these prisoners on time with all their property that they bring with them.
The issue has piled pressure on Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy, accused of withholding information when flailing under questioning at the dispatch box. But both main parties have questions to answer.
The idea of accidental release from prison is incredibly serious. They averaged about 60 every year. We were in office 262 such cases in Labour's first year. But you're asking me about the truth. They're the stats, and that's what matters.
The combination of a prison estate built in the 1800s, paper-based processes designed in the 1980s and 2 decades of underfunding in the 2000s have left a system and the ministers who oversee it losing public confidence almost as fast as they mislay prisoners.
The judge, he told me you are released.
Ministers will promise to get a grip, but Brahmin Kador Sharif is unlikely to be the last felon released in error. Paul Kelso, Sky News.
80 years on from the end of the Second World War, the King has led the nation in a 2-minute silence during a Remembrance Sunday service at the Cenotaph. Events were held in all 4 nations of the United Kingdom, with senior politicians and thousands of veterans in attendance. Our royal correspondent Nora Bundock reports.
It is the familiar setting for this sombre scene, centred on the Cenotaph in central London for the customary commemoration. The King leading the national service of remembrance, with members of his family by his side and watching on from Whitehall balconies.
We who here do honour to the memory of those who have died in the service of their country and of the Crown.
Leaders past and present together for this rare moment of political and public solidarity. And as Big Ben struck 11, the most poignant of pauses for the 2-minute silence. Making his way to the foot of the Cenotaph, the King laid his wreath on behalf of country and Commonwealth. It is a moment to mark conflicts past and present. And slowly, the veterans had their turn. 10,000 turned out, lining the way along Whitehall, including Kenneth Embleton, 101, and this the first time he marched.
It was very moving, actually, you know. Yeah. I thought more of the wooden crosses I'd left behind, and I wondered what they'd think, you know, if they could come back. And they'd be pleased, I think, by the population is still thinking about what happened, you know.
From World War II, there are only a few remaining who can still say, I was there.
I don't think these days people do think about them and realise what a favour they did for all the people left behind.
People should never forget about the destruction and the death that wars create. And people should be building things, not destroying them.
Each person here brings their own memories, but all came to salute service and sacrifice, giving thanks, paying respect, and remembering those who didn't return. Laura Bundock, Sky News in central London.
A powerful super typhoon has slammed into the Philippines, bringing winds of up to 143 miles per hour, torrential rain and dangerous storm surges. More than 1 million people were evacuated from areas prone to flooding and landslide before Kangwon made landfall. Sadia Chowdhury reports.
Water is everywhere here. On the ground, gushing from the sky and hitting everything in its path sideways. Philippines is no stranger to storms, but this is the strongest this year. Super Typhoon Kangwon battered the northeastern coast, cancelling flights, knocking down power lines and damaging vital bridges and infrastructure. Look at how these homes are fully submerged. Nearly 1 million people have been evacuated from high-risk villages. Waterproof plastic bags carry their essentials, and this woman ignores the risk to use one to protect herself. Typhoon Fongwong made landfall this evening, having been upgraded to super typhoon with sustained winds of 115 miles per hour and gusts of 143. It comes straight after another typhoon, Kalmegi, left a trail of destruction this week and 224 people dead. Over 100 were still missing as rescuers worked through the destruction at the end of the week. The country is in a state of emergency as it deals with back-to-back extreme weather disturbances. Its Coast Guard on the move again, helping people out of their homes, holding their hands to safety, carrying them where needed. Some of them end up here, a sports hall providing a dry makeshift village to take shelter, and somewhere to wait until it's safe to go home. Sadia Chowdhury, Sky News.
Well, that super typhoon over Asia and Hurricane Melissa in the Caribbean last week have brought the issue of climate change back into stark focus. Negotiators will meet tomorrow in Brazil for the 30th annual COP summit, while in the Amazon, indigenous tribes are battling to save their land. Our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, has spent time with the Kayapo people and sent this report.
It's nothing less than paradise. A wilderness the same size as Portugal, inhabited by just 9,000 indigenous people, the Kayapo. Their presence here, the only reason this near-pristine rainforest is still standing. As we drive towards their territory, you can see they're not just up against the relentless destruction of rainforest, but a warming climate too.
You see that hill over there?
Igor Ferreira has been making this trip for 15 years.
When you mix this high temperature, you mix the degradation of the forest, you have an explosive situation.
Soon enough, we see smoke from the road.
And this is how the Amazon is disappearing, by literally going up in smoke. Because of the changing climate, the dry season's getting longer, temperatures are hotter, and there's less rainfall.
Last year, there was a record number of fires, almost all of them man-made, undermining much of the progress made by the Brazilian government in slowing the clear-cutting of forests by unscrupulous cattle ranchers and illegal miners. After 4 more hours by boat, we're made to stop.
We're coming up on the Kayapo guard post. This is like indigenous border control.
The Kayapo once killed incomers to protect their rainforest. Whoa! The weapons are ceremonial now. Instead, they've built ties with outside organisations to coordinate the protection of their territory. The remote village of Kubekrakeng treats us to a traditional Kayapo welcome.
That was absolutely exhausting, but also kind of amazing at the same time. And it's interesting, they say one of the reasons the Kayapo have been so successful in protecting the forest because of their strong sense of cultural identity and their kind of unity, but at the same time, you know, these people are on their mobile phones, they're filming what we're doing. These are people that understand very well indeed how the rest of the world works.
But from the air, you can see the Kayapo aren't totally united. Below us, miles of illegal gold mines have destroyed forest, polluted rivers and provided access for logging. Some are inside Kayapo territory, where a few clans have taken cash in return for allowing gold miners access.
É triste quando a gente ganha dinheiro fácil. É muito triste. Quando o Cuben chega, cava e não vai tampar. Do jeito que vai estar aí, ele vai embora. Porque a riqueza é nossa, não é do Cuben. É isso.
In a village called Kamokdejam, a Kayapo elder takes us into the forest. Once we've managed to catch up with him, he tells me how a warmer, drier climate is changing even this intact rainforest. And if leaders don't believe it, that's because they live far away in comfortable cities. If that's the case, what, I ask him, does he think of Donald Trump? He says he's never heard of him. Unlike the US president, Kayapo leaders will be attending the climate summit, where the new fund could reverse the economics of deforestation in favour of trees. Payment for protecting the forest may bring challenges, but having met the Kayapo, it seems their forest has always come first and always will. Tom Clark, Sky News, Brazil.
Israel says forensic testing has confirmed that remains handed over by Hamas belong to an Israeli soldier killed in Gaza in 2014. Hadar Goldin, who has become a national symbol in Israel, died 2 hours after a ceasefire took effect in that year's war between Israel and Hamas. At least 3 people have died after being pulled into the Atlantic Ocean during a tidal surge in Spain's Canary Islands. Officials say another 15 people were injured along the coast of Tenerife. Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa has been filmed playing basketball ahead of his White House meeting with Donald Trump tomorrow. The US previously detained him for joining al-Qaeda in Iraq. He'll be the first Syrian president to visit Washington since 1946. Time now to get all the latest sports news with Mike.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report. Sky Mobile sponsors the transfer window on Sky Sports News.
Right.
Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank was all smiles with his teammates today, but his future still seems somewhat uncertain.
Honest, I'm just sick and tired of this.
The number that was put before me was 50% more than our highest paid player at the time.
Jimmy had the feeling, do they really want me here?
My determination was not to sell Jimmy to that particular club.
It made me look bad in front of the fans. It was not necessary.
The biggest single challenge is how we managed his exit publicly, which probably Jimmy didn't like very much.
He's settling into his new surrounds. The player renamed Judas Floyd Money in the Bank when he was drummed out of Ellen Road.
Don't believe the figures at all. Don't believe the figures at all.
Reading the text last night, that was nothing about money from his agent. Well, Jesus, lads, honestly.
I just think he's greedy.
The perception that people have of me, the difficult person, blah, 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 never there. Sometimes things happen for a reason.
Another day, another summer signing. The delightfully named Gerald Floyd Hasselbank from Boa Vista. Jimmy to his pals.
Have you heard about people like Billy Bremner and Norman Hunter and things like that?
No.
You never heard of them?
No.
You'll find out about them.
Yeah, I will find out, but I never heard of them, no.
They tell me you put Jimmy. They call you Jimmy and that's it, is that right?
Yes, they call me Jimmy in Portugal and that's it. I think in the beginning of the season I'm gonna learn about English football. But I want to make the best of it and score so much goals as possible.
Well, he finished second top goal scorer in Portugal, so he looks as if he's a finisher, which we were lacking goals last season.
We'd been out to look at Bruno Ribeiro. We signed Bruno Ribeiro and Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank. It was £2 million and he was an unknown. And you think to yourself, is that money well spent? Nobody had heard of him.
George Graham said to me, we've got to go down to Lisbon on the Sunday because we were going to watch this player. The player was Jimmy Hasselbank. I remember seeing him in a very run-down, low-key stadium. You knew straight away, there's something there.
And I remember looking at the back of a bus. I was looking and going, who are them two? Because it said the new attack line for, as I said, the men in white. And they said, who are they? And I remember looking, and it was a picture of me and Jimmy. On the thing, I was like, oh my God. It took a while to adjust, but everyone saw he had one thing on his mind, and that was to score goals.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Now, while much of the country stopped today to pay tribute to those who made the ultimate sacrifice in war, in the Midlands a special sculpture was unveiled to remember workers exempt from military conscription. Occupations like mining and chain making were deemed essential to the war effort, but many of those involved in such vital work still ended up experiencing feelings of guilt. Our Midlands correspondent Lisa Dowd reports now from the unveiling.
The names just keep being added of people who weren't allowed to go and fight. Their job at home was too important. Called reserved occupationists, Luke's granddad Eric was one of them.
I think there was a very complicated set of feelings going on. He never said that he wanted to fight necessarily, but I think he did say that he felt that perhaps he should have gone. And that sense of duty was very heavy to that generation. And that, I think, is what they carried for their lives.
During World War II, reserved occupations, like mining, were deemed essential. The chain makers of Cradley Heath, whose chains helped power ships, were also exempt from military conscription. And in that town, in the West Midlands, a sculpture will commemorate them and millions like them.
That's my father, 7th on the left, on the back, and that's my uncle Ernie. Like I said, he never went to school.
This is your dad?
Yes, that's right. Yes, that's my father there. That's right.
Jen's dad, Leslie, worked in transport.
Well, he felt really, as some people suggested or said to him, are you a conscientious objector? Well, it hurt him really, it really did. His younger brother went to war. Luckily, he served. He did come back, but it sort of gave a bit of unrest in the family as to why the elder son couldn't go to war or hadn't gone to war.
Nicola's dad, Job, was a miner.
He was a bit embarrassed, I think, really, because all his brothers were fighting in the war, and nothing was, at the time, nothing was really said about people who were down the mine and that. And for years and years, I think he always wondered if he was appreciated for what he did.
There was little recognition until now, and it means so much that untold stories are finally being heard. Lisa Dowd, Sky News, Cradley Heath.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. When we come back, I'll be joined by broadcaster and commentator Matt Stadlen and writer and broadcaster Angela Epstein. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of The Guardian. The headline, BBC Director General Tim Davie steps down over Panorama row. We will be right back. Do stay with us.